Hello and welcome. This is Dr. Muhammad Shaukat Ansari from your lovely channel Learn English with Shaukat Ansari. Here in this teaching lesson, I am going to discuss Aristotle's Poetics and the summary of its chapter 9. My dear lovely students, chapter 9 or Aristotle's Poetics as a whole is prescribed to undergraduate courses in many universities, and chapter 9 is also prescribed to undergraduate course, for those students who are majoring English, and this is for the second semester also, MJC. So far the summary of chapter 9 is concerned. Here Aristotle discusses poetry as a higher thing than history. He is making a distinction between poetry and history, and he is in favor of poetry, verses. And while discussing this distinction between the historian and the poet, Aristotle says that the historian is one who writes in prose, while the poet is one who writes in verse. And here the distinction emerges. And while presenting this distinction between a poet and a historian, Aristotle cites a Greek historian and a geographer who was from the Greek city of Halicarnassus, and this is the part of Persian Empire that time, and now it is in Turkey. Halicarnassus, Halicarnassus. Herodotus, a Greek historian and geographer from the Greek city of Halicarnassus, and Aristotle quotes him in order to analyze the value of a historian when he writes in the style of verse. Coming to the first slide, I would like to tell you that Aristotle determines the function of a poet, and he says the function of a poet, the job of a poet is to relate what has happened, but what may happen, that is what is possible according to the law of probability and necessity. According to Aristotle in this chapter 9, the Greek word for poet means a maker, and a poet is a maker in the words of Aristotle, not because he makes verses, but because he makes his artistic ordering plot. So a poet is a maker of thoughts, a maker of artistic plot. Okay? While elucidating the ideas further in this chapter 9, in Poetics, Aristotle says poetry is more philosophical and higher thing than history, because poetry tends to express the universal while history has to express the particular. Universal, a theme, an idea that appeals all ages, all communities, and all times. If I say honesty is the best policy, this is an appealing and universal idea. No one can deny it. It means, according to Aristotle, poetry is more philosophical and higher thing than history because poetry tends to express the universal ideas, while history has to express the particular. The distinction between the historian and the poet is not in the one writing prose and the other verse. While referring the works of Herodotus into verse, and they are still a species of history. Herodotus, as I have told you, was a Greek historian and geographer, and he wrote history, and his accounts are like writings in verse. However, they are a species of history. Aristotle further says in this chapter 9, poetry does not aim at depicting photographic realism. What should be the function? What should be the aim? What should be the thematic purpose, thematic objective of poetry? That it doesn't aim at depicting, delineating, expressing photographic realism. It is the function of a poet to relate not what has actually happened, but what may possibly happen or take place in accordance with the law of probability and necessity. This is a remarkable quote. Poetry is the imitation of the poet's idea of life, and from this arises its universality. Why poetry, according to Aristotle, is universal, must be universal? Because it imitates the idea of life, and here is the root of becoming universal approach. Aristotle further says in this chapter, chapter 9 in Poetics, the writers of tragedy do well in retaining the actual names of characters whom they represent in their tragedies, because the use of those actual names makes the happenings more credible. However, there are also some tragedies in which there are only one or two well-known names, the rest being fictitious. In still other tragedies, none of the names are well known, and yet such plays also give the pleasure that we expect from a tragedy. Here, Aristotle defines the function of a tragedy. Next, as I have told you that in the words of Aristotle, in the opinions of Aristotle, the poet is a maker, and this word poet in Greek is also known as maker. The poet or maker should be the maker of the plots rather than of verses, because he is a poet who imitates actions. Aristotle defines the function, the motto, the intention of a poet, and a poet imitates actions. So he is a good maker of plot. Of all plots and actions, the episodic are the worst. A plot is episodic if the episodes or events follow one another without a probable or necessary sequence. If in any plot events are produced in haphazard way, in fragmented ways, according to Aristotle, if they don't have sequences, they are episodic plot, and Aristotle here intends to condemn episodic plot. So episodic plot is that where events or sequences or actions are presented in haphazard manners, in fragmented manners, and Aristotle said there must be unity, there must be harmony in the presentation of the actions and episodes or events, and if it doesn't present in such a way, it means it is episodic a plot, and Aristotle said it is not good at all. The plot of a tragedy, according to Aristotle, must also inspire fear and pity. A good thought, a good idea is being propelled here, that a good plot of a tragedy must also inspire fear and pity, must rouse fear and pity. Such an effect is best produced when the events come on us by surprise, and the effect is enhanced when they follow a cause and effect. If there is a cause, or if there is an effect in the presentation of plot, and if it inspires fear and pity in readers, it means it is a good plot. It means it is a well knit and well woven plot. The tragic wonder is greater if this principle is observed, because events which happen just by chance do not produce the same effect. It means that tragedy is an imitation not only of a complete action but also of events arousing pity and fear. Mark this part. There must be a complete action. There must be an imitation of complete actions in a good plot, and also it must be associated with the events that arouse pity and fear in readers, in viewers, in watchers, like this. So pity and fear, arousing pity and fear, inspiring pity and fear, instigating pity and fear in readers, number one criterion. Number two, it must be an imitation. And number three, it must be complete action, a pack of complete action or actions. Thank you very much for being with me, my dear lovely students. In the previous teaching video, I dealt with chapter 8, and this video has dealt with chapter 9. And before I leave, I would like to tell you that subscribe to this channel, Learn English with Shaukat Ansari, and also make it a hit among learners of English. And this is for BA semester 2 majoring English students. Thank you very much for being with me. See you.